Hello, everyone. This is Paul, the Oaken Knight, coming back to you once again after taking an extended Christmas break, recovering from laryngitis and an engineering casualty at the home. And among my holiday haul, Santa left Stellar Horizons, a game where you, yes, you, head one of 7 national space programs, chartered to explore and develop the solar system, paving the way to Alpha Centauri. Beginning in the year 2030 and going on for up to 16 decades, Stellar Horizons gradually opens up the solar system to you as you launch both manned and robotic missions and accumulate technology points in biologic, physics, and engineering sciences. The technology tree is huge, 67 techs spread across 3 disciplines. In addition, each of the 7 factions also gets to set policies that provide additional capabilities, and each faction has its own unique advantage. If that's not enough, each faction has its own unique mix of ships that are sent out on missions. Gameplay provides a good mix of really interesting scenarios, both competitive and cooperative, that include establishing Martian colonies, establishing colonies on Titan, neutralizing an incoming killer asteroid, countering an alien invasion, fighting a civil war against rebellious Martian colonies, and more. Plus the full campaign game. Playing time will of course vary greatly, but I'd guess a full campaign with 7 players would go in excess of 50 hours. Having said that, all the games, big and small, are played using all 7 factions. Non-player factions use a very simplified system that only partially represents them in the game, but strikes a good balance between simplicity and influence on the game. Horizons is impressive for many reasons. Physically, pick up this beast, and you immediately know that you have a serious game on your hands. Open up the Rulebook, and you see the game designer, developer, Andrew Rader, has an email address at mit.edu. A quick web search shows Andrew has his very own Wikipedia page with a resume that includes a PhD from MIT, several published research papers with titles the length of small paragraphs, and current employment at SpaceX planning long-range space missions. How did this guy find time to design a game? Despite his professional credentials, the rules are approachable, but I do love it when he lapses into space talk like heliocentric transfer. And now, a minor confession. I am a space geek. I don't remember Project Mercury, but I absolutely remember the Titan rockets blasting Gemini capsules off and into orbit. Generally after innumerable countdown halts. Only problem was that the blast-offs always seemed to happen on Saturday mornings, right when all my cartoons were on. Remember, there were only 3 channels to watch back then. Yup, Horizon scratches my inner space geek more than any board game I've ever seen. Components. Stellar Horizons was first published in 2020 by Compass Games and is now available in a second printing. And it is a true second printing, not a second edition. Everything appears to have been replicated, including the printing errors. But upon opening the box, you immediately notice signs of Horizon's quality. While pretty much every game I have ever seen has an errata sheet printed on skimpy paper, tossed in at the last minute, Horizons prints it on nice cardstock. Moreover, an additional sheet is also included with the package, number 26 if you count them, with replacement for error counters or those deemed having some kind of minor, almost unnoticeable error. The attention to detail here is truly impressive. The map is unlike anything I have ever seen before. Big stuff like planets each have their own scaled hexagon. Huge for Jupiter, much more modest for Mercury. Moons orbiting around the planets each have their own, still sizable circular counters. Other entities such as asteroid belts, deep space, and our nearest celestial neighbor, Alpha Centauri, are also here. Of these, only the moons have a fixed position, attached to their host planets. Nothing else connects. It is up to you to leave whatever space you have available to arrange the planets into the solar system we know. Be that a tabletop or a basketball court, it's up to you. In my case, I have a 4x4 space motif neoprene mat that I picked up years ago that fits neatly on the center of my current game table. I say current because my long-awaited game table upgrade project is underway. We'll see where that moonshot goes. Anyway, for me, the planets are laid out in a kind of spiral pattern that works and looks great. Planets and the like contain information such as its distance from the Earth, the type of technology that is available to discover should you send a crewed or robotic vessel to do exploration, whether the entity is eligible for so-called world cards, which is actually a largest game counter, not a card, and what chance there is to detect signs of life, and ultimately to discover life itself. World cards are picked from a random assortment whenever an exploration is particularly successful such that it depletes the stock of mysteries on the relevant astronomical body. World cards augment the base resources already known to be on the planet and may increase the odds of a successful exploration for certain types of spacecraft. So, for example, the so-called near-Earth asteroids have little in the way of inherent mineable resources, but attach the right world card and its value may go way up. Note that only world cards that share at least one attribute with its host may be attached. So, for example, a volcanic world card tile may not be attached to a gas giant. But if both share at least one attribute, such as rocky, you have a match and the world tile may be applied. Each celestial body functions almost like its own mini-map, where players can go into orbit, land on the planet, or simply do a flyby. It also contains space for a sort of countdown timer representing the number of turns it takes to get there. So, for example, it will only take one turn to fly an orbiter to Mars, but it may take a whole decade to get to Neptune, although research can reduce transit time substantially. The counters in the game are superb. Big, chunky, easy to read, and very well laid out. I think Horizons has more counter sheets than any other game that I own. 25 of them, plus the errata sheet. Some sheets contain large items, such as the desktop for each of the 7 factions. Others contain the celestial bodies, with Jupiter taking up a substantial portion of a sheet all by itself. That is all good because there are over 1,700 counters included in the game. Do not let this scare you, as the great majority of counters are numbered tokens representing the quantities of the 3 different types of research points, 3 different types of resources, and of course, money tokens, the smallest of which is $1 billion, inflation at its best. Each faction has its own counters representing CVs, crewed vessels, not aircraft carriers, RVs, robotic exploration vehicles, not motorhomes, and LVs, launch vehicles, aka rockets. More cool space talk. CVs and LVs are rated for their size, such as LV3 or a CV5, but are only available to you once your faction reaches a given technology level. Moreover, CVs can have different ratings even within the same size category, and each faction has a different mix of counters, emphasizing one aspect or another. RVs also vary by function and carry a functional designation such as orbiter, flyby, rover, probe, or orbital telescope. Different factions weigh their fleets differently. So, for example, Japan is heavily into robotic explorers, while Russia is much better at crewed vehicles. Each and every one of the counters in the game are individually mounted on their sprue. Usually, I cringe when I punch out a war game with this many counters, but let me tell you, every single one of the counters in this game popped out effortlessly, and with no need for even the smallest amount of cleanup. Hats off to Bill and the good folks supporting him over at Compass for the tremendous quality of the components in Horizons. The primary player's aid materials are the 7 faction dashboards and the hard-mounted technology tree. While all are adequate for their purpose, there are some useful add-ons available in the files section of Board Game Geek worth considering. The game, of course, includes the Rulebook, 2 full copies with about 20 pages, plus 7, you heard me, 7 copies of the main section of the rules outlining the sequence of play in great detail. While the rules are pretty much free of space jargon that might come from an MIT PhD, it is here we see the biggest issue with the game. The rules almost conspire to make the game hard to learn. First, the table of contents, while present, is inadequate, as it only shows the Level 1 and Level 2 section headings. Further, there are no page numbers in the TOC. Second, there is no index. Yep, they did it again. Let me repeat this once again. No game of significant complexity and size should ever be published without an index rulebook. A decent index dramatically reduces the amount of time taken to find a rule and should be required by the publisher. Third, while there is a section with several examples of play, I am convinced that I saw new rules being introduced that were not specified by the rules section of the book. Let me repeat this one as well. The examples of play section should never be used to introduce new rules. Finally, some rules may seem clear when you read them, but not when you look at them in the context of other rules. More on this later, but based on the volume of comments on Board Game Geek, I am not alone here. Gameplay. Play begins in 2030 with each faction having its own small fleet at varying points of the solar system. Each faction has its own technology levels, which vary from North America and Russia's technology leadership to lesser powers having almost nothing. In my test game, Japan could only launch crewed vessels into Earth orbit. Russia could reach out to the Moon and near-Earth orbits, and North America could get CVs all the way to Mars. Base building is of vital importance and can provide research, materials production, and operational advantages to its owner. Bases become colonies for their owner when occupied by settlements, increasing the overall value of the base and scoring victory points at the end of the game. The sequence of play is long and involved, but boils down to the following. First, economic phase. The economic phase occurs once each decade, not until after game turn 10 in the campaign game, and allows technology upgrades, political alignment shifts, supply movement, and other game infrastructure. Because the EP does not occur until after the 10th turn, the game has a sort of programmed instruction built into the design. Some game elements, such as combat, cannot begin until even later in the game, so you get real comfortable with mission planning and execution before you have to face additional complications. Second, buying stuff. The phases that follow occur each and every yearly turn, as opposed to only once a decade. At this point, factions spend their billions buying new ships, rockets, and Earth-based resources. Factions with an Earth orbital base, until they have the space elevator technology, must undertake missions to fly supplies to their orbital base in order to use them. Third, movement. There are lots of subphases here, but they boil down to decrementing the transit time clock for each ship performing interplanetary movement. Next, factions move their ships and launch new missions from Earth. Ships roll for launch failure when initially launched, and engine fail for each movement thereafter, except for when counting down on their interplanetary movement clock. Ships may land, where permitted, dock with a base, take off, go into orbit, transition to a body that is part of the planetary system, like our moon, or leave for another planet. Actions may be combined into a single move until the ship lands, docks, loads, unloads cargo, or leaves their planetary system. Ships doing an interplanetary move enter the destination's countdown timer depending on the distance traveled and their faction's engine technology level. For example, a ship moving from Earth at position 0, moving to Jupiter at position 5 would take 5 turns to get there, adjusted downward for advanced engine technologies. Note that CVs are distance limited to their nearest support base, including Earth. CVs may venture ever farther into the solar system by some combination of bases plus improvements in their inherent technology that permit them to jump even further. Exploration. The primary purpose of spacecraft, whether manned or robotic, is to explore. Exploration works as follows. Step 1. Calculate the exploration value. Spacecraft having an exploration value, the number in the green circle to the lower left of the counter's obverse, are capable of exploring. The total exploration value is the sum of spacecraft exploration value, which must be greater than 0 to make the attempt, faction technology bonuses, world card bonuses such as +2 for RV orbiters, and finally the exploration value of the body being searched. After adding all 4 of these up into a single sum, the tens digit is the number of automatically successful explorations, and the ones digit is rolled for on a d10. For example, an exploration value of 14 results in 1 automatically successful exploration plus a d10 roll with 40% chance of success. The subject of the search will have a value and color telling how many increments it is from total depletion and what type of research point will be gained if successful. For each success, 1 counter is pulled from a cup containing counters for only that type of research. For example, a single success on a physics planet will allow the player to pull 1 counter from the physics research cup. Counters are accumulated during the decade and cashed in for advances in technology during the economics phase that only occurs once each decade. Technology counters contain a single number representing its technology value. Numbers will be any one of 1, 2, 3, or 5 points. Factions accumulate points, as I have indicated, but something special happens in addition if the counter is a 3 or a 5. Pulling a 3 or a 5-point tech results in resource depletion. In this case, the resource is technology, and of course, the research points are credited to the exploring faction just as the less valuable tokens are. Once a body is depleted, no further explorations may be performed there, and consequently, no further changes may be made to the attached world card if one is present. The procedure for depletion is, first, decrement the exploration value of the body being searched. Each decrement will reduce the exploration value of the body, making successful searches harder to come by in the future until it is fully depleted when it reaches 0. For example, Earth begins as a 3-point biologic technology planet. Searches will benefit from 3 additional exploration points until the depletion brings it down to a 2. Second, gain 1 political point that may be converted into victory points, international relations die roll modifiers, or even money during the economic phase. Third, draw 1 random world, and if it is compatible with the body being explored, optionally attach it to the planet, moon, asteroid, etc. being explored. Attaching a world card will kick any existing card back into the random draw pool for possible reassignment. Fourth, roll for signs of life, and if signs of life are already there, roll for finding life itself. Finding life conveys a number of benefits to the finder, plus increases the research value of the body whereupon life was found. For most search targets, the chance of finding life is very small, but for a few, it can reach up to 12 or 14% per attempt. Bases. Bases serve 3 main functions if augmented with various optional improvements. First, mining and research. Bases that have been improved with mining and or research capabilities add the value of its host resource or technology points, including those added by a world card, to its owner's total at the start of the decade's economic phase. Each faction chooses 1 resource to add. So, for example, a base with a mining capability could mine for any one of fuel, supply, or ore, the stuff that allows you to build ships, bases, etc. Mined materials are located at the base that mined it and may require transport somewhere else to be useful. Second, operation support. CVs have a chance to enter reserve status when used for exploration, among other activities. The CV is flipped to its reserve side and subsequently may only be used to transport materials so it can still move and defend in combat until it is resupplied. To resupply, a reserve CV must proceed to a base, including landing on Earth, pay 1 fuel plus 1 supply point from a base to become fully active again. CVs that find themselves outside of their operating range, such as would happen if a friendly base were destroyed, immediately enter reserve status. Ships may also enter reserve status by failing a recall roll that is done after each exploration attempt. Recall rolls are quite stiff early in the game, beginning at a 50% chance of failure, but become more favorable as new technologies are learned. Failing a recall roll isn't 100% bad, as it allows you to pull a biology technology counter out of the cup. Third, colonization. Bases become colonies when a settlement is built on site. Unlike other base improvements, there is no limit to the number of settlements it can support. Settlements add ever-increasing economic value to the base, plus endgame victory points. The farther the base is from Earth, the more VPs per settlement are awarded. Spacecraft. Crewed spacecraft are high-value, high-expense exploration, base settlement, and military ships. Each is assigned a size value, such as a CV2 being a common size limit at the start of the campaign. CVs are also assigned one or two of three ship attributes, including exploration value, sensors, cargo capacity, and combat value. Capabilities may vary from ship to ship, even with the same faction and ship size. So, the North Americans may have one CV2 that has a strong sensor rating, but no other attributes, plus another that is well balanced. Russia has a CV2 that has a large cargo rating, but nothing else, while Japan does not know how to build CVs at the start of the campaign at all. And there are 4 factions that I have not played yet, but rest assured, each one is different. Flexible ships are particularly important, as a CV is required to be present to build a base, plus that CV must be exploration capable and that it is carrying all of the resources that are required to do the build. Even though North American CVs can get to Mars at the campaign start, they cannot yet carry the supplies to build the base there. That will come after more research. RVs, robotic vehicles. There are 5 robotic spacecraft that may be built. Their only purpose is exploration. They are, first, orbiters. Orbiters fly out to their target and perform exploration until they malfunction. Orbiters may explore the body they are orbiting, and also any other body in the planetary system with a -1 negative sensor modifier. Rovers. Rovers land on their target and perform exploration until they malfunction. Third, flyby satellites. Flyby satellites are always moving, generally heading farther and farther out into the solar system until they malfunction. Flyby satellites are the only spacecraft that can explore while they are in interplanetary space. The turn delay box they occupy is a negative die roll modifier to their success probability. Therefore, a flyby satellite occupying the 2 box will have 20% less chance of success than one actually in the flyby box. Flyby satellites may explore each and every turn until they malfunction. They may voluntarily be placed farther out on their tile's heliocentric transfer track than would otherwise be required, to allow for additional turns of exploration, but once they reach the flyby box, they must fly farther out into the solar system. As an exception, they may be positioned at Mercury or Venus immediately after launching from Earth, and then begin their journey to the outer edge of the solar system. Fourth, probes. Probes are one-shot parasitic exploration vehicles that are combined with one of the other RV satellites. Probes have a high probability of success, but are always eliminated after 1 turn of use. They always malfunction. When used, their host, for example, an orbital satellite, is not used and cannot malfunction. But their high sensor value and low cost make them extremely useful. Fifth, orbital telescopes. Orbital telescopes may be launched into Earth orbit and explore anywhere except Alpha Centauri. However, the exploration value of its target is cut in half, and telescopes may never complete a mission. For that reason, the deep space tile with a physics exploration value of 9 is a frequent target. Most telescopes have a 70% chance of success when searching in deep space. That would be the 2 for the telescope, plus 9 divided by 2 rounded up equals 7. Malfunctions. Every time a satellite is used to explore, it must roll for a possible malfunction. The malfunction does not take effect until after the exploration is complete. The base chance of a malfunction is 30%, which can be modified by technology levels and national advantages. Also, each time a malfunction occurs, the faction is allowed to pick an engineering token out of the engineering research cup and add it to their total. They learned something. LVs, launch vehicles. Launch vehicles are used to, first, launch spacecraft from the surface of the Earth. An LV-1 may launch any RV, but a CV must be launched by an LV of its size or greater. Note that the largest LV is an LV-4, so CV size 5 or higher must be built off Earth. Second, shoot resources from point A to point B with no delay. Having resource transportation done without any transit delay bothers some players, but Andrew presented good reasons for this on Board Game Geek in terms of gameplay, and assuming that there is a logistics command that sweats the details of getting supplies where they are needed, and in your position, you don't need to worry about it. I buy the argument. Each time an LV is used, or when any unit moves, except when traveling between planets, there is a chance that engines will fail. The base chance is 5% minus the CV level, if any, modified by technology. Only one failure row is required per turn, even if the move has more than one segment. A note on strategery. After learning the basics, you will find that at least in the early game, your decisions will center around which of the three branches of technology you need to develop to get the technological advances you have targeted in the next economic phase. For example, if you are ever going to have a Mars colony, your CVs must be capable of traveling at least a distance of 1 from Earth. Even then, you must still be able to lug the needed supplies to do the build, so you need to research a CV level that can carry them, or the technology that will reduce the supplies needed to build the base, or both. You may find yourself planning 20 years in advance to get what you need to build that Mars colony. Later in the game, you may get into trading, making interfactional friends and enemies, even having combat. But that may not be for some 50 years as rivalries develop. As a competitive game, the campaign may have interfactional combat, even between competing alliances. Combat is considered limited and never allowed between factions on the Earth tile. Combat is always allowed between factions and space pirates. Yo-ho-ho! Missions. Each player receives a secret mission counter that provides additional benefits should they get a deplete result while exploring it. The mission's objective is not known to competing players, and therefore it is not competitive. There is also a single shared mission that could become competitive should more than one player decide to go after it simultaneously. The shared mission does not really pose a solitaire problem, as it is pretty obvious when a faction is going after it. Each mission has a VP value printed on it, and some have constraints such as the earliest year it can come into play. Completing missions also give $1 billion of additional income per decade per completed mission, up to certain limits for the rest of the game, so they are very much worth going after. Evaluation. I like the concept behind Stellar Horizons. The whole idea of different world factions vying for the resources space may provide humanity, beginning from the near future, going out over a century, is compelling. On the whole, Andrew got the design right. I particularly like how it is possible to play the game with as many or as few controlled factions as you want. You simply play each as best you can and let the non-player faction rules take care of the rest. The downside. Most of the issues presented by the game, in my opinion, go back to rules clarity. For example, I cannot find anywhere in the rules that specify whether CVs explore while in orbit, on planet, or both. The examples of play describe orbital exploration, but this does not necessarily bar exploration on the surface. I believe the rules are silent on this point. Further, exploration on gas giants is something of a tangled web of rules interpretation, where the interaction between the base rule, which states that bases include space stations for Earth and at gas planets, and surface bases, other worlds, but get obfuscated when you throw in rules for hostile atmospheres and space elevators. I believe that there are more questions on this on Board Game Geek than anything else. Andrew chimed in by suggesting that bases could be built on gas giants as they would float on the thick atmosphere, kind of like an ocean liner on the ocean. That is all fine, but that is not what the base building rules say. I could get into this more, but suffice to say that even a rocket scientist may not be smart enough to be both the game designer and the game developer all by himself. These are two very different skills, the former being the divergent thinking blue sky guy, and the latter the convergent thinking guy making it all work. It would take a rare individual to do both jobs on any project as sophisticated as Stellar Horizons. In closing, I like this game, and if you can live with some of the house rules, I think you will as well. Stellar Horizons deserves its very respectable Board Game Geek rating of about 360th, flaws and all. What issues there are can be fixed with some simple tweaks and clarifications. I have avoided saying this so far, but the game is both fun and, may I say, fascinating. That being said, I think the game would greatly benefit from a true second edition rulebook, not necessarily a full-blown second edition printing of the game, but a second edition of the rules not done by Andrew, but instead by a good, solid, experienced game developer. A second set of eyes ferreting out inconsistencies, errors, and omissions could turn Stellar Horizons into a top 100 game. The ideas behind the game and the execution thereof are that good. Okay, my friends, that is all for now. If I get a good response from you guys, I'd like to do a second video that demonstrates gameplay and shows you how I interpret the rules and smooth over its issues. Please send a comment if you'd like to see that. And I'd surely appreciate it if you could give me a subscription and a thumbs up. It connects you to the channel and lets the world know that you like what I am doing. But for now, though, this is Paul, the Oaken Knight, wishing you all a pleasant evening.